All right, class, so it's the first week of Yu-Gi-Oh! In the new format, and some huge changes have already happened. Go figure, right? Today, we're going to be talking about some of the top decks being used, some of the new techs players are experimenting with, and going over what is going to be the new Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta as we prepare for the next huge event. Let's go ahead and jump on in. What's going on with y'all big dogs? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that your day phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the ruin the... I'll let the chat fill it in. Rest of your day, rest of your beginning of the day. Whoa, what are you talking about? Remember, don't let the bad start of your day ruin the rest. I'm sick of you guys. Stop. So today, chat, I'm going to be talking about some of the new cards that you should consider playing inside of your main deck, or some of the new cards that have popped up in the meta and why. And then we're going to be going over a ton of deck lists over a couple of regionals. Some of you guys didn't know that there was actually a huge 800-man regional. That could be considered a YCS event. And then there were some other regionals that popped up with some really interesting decks that we have access to the deck list. But before that, let's talk about some really popular cards or some tech cards that players have been using. I want to apologize to the people that have watched my Steeples tier list, because some cards are way higher, or should be a little bit higher, than what I previously mentioned. I noticed that a player was using DD Crow inside of his deck. Now, if you guys don't know what DD Crow does, it's a quick effect that allows you to be able to banish a monster or card in the graveyard. And the reason why this card is so good is because it's good against Mermails in Memento, something that the bestial monsters cannot hit. The theory behind it is that you can use it against Mermail to delete the cost card before it can gain its effects. Let's say if Atlantean Prince sends Atlantean Dragoons to the graveyard for its activation requirement. If you DD Crow the Dragoon, they won't be able to get its effect after resolving. The reason why it's so effective is because it banishes the card before it can ever activate. That's like the simplest way of saying it, class. And it's also good against Memento because banishing Memento Giotic allows you to be able to prevent your opponent from getting a lot more resources. I think it's a pivotal choke point. A lot of those targets aren't light or dark, which the Bestials normally cover, and since DD Crow has versatility to be able to hit just about any single Yu-Gi-Oh deck, it's a card that players are considering using again. All right, so here is the article, and it details why DD Crow works in the way that I just explained to it, and why you should be picking up DD Crow right now. It actually is a pretty decent article that explains how this card works. So go ahead and check it out. Another card that players are using is Ally of Justice Cycle Reader. Now this card is a little more specific, but it actually does have two decent targets. Being able to go against Blue Eyes and hit cards like Maiden of White alongside of Blue Eyes White Dragon can be huge. And then also being able to hit the Fiendsmith cards, hitting Engraver plus Laurie, huge. Hitting a Link monster like Sequence plus Engraver, huge. There's so many times where Ally of Justice Cycle Reader can be incredibly good. Another card that I've been seeing a lot is Bolchummy Meows. Now, Meows is really good against decks like Memento, but Big Brain Cali wasn't thinking that it was actually good against Maliss too for some reason. It's also pretty decent against Fiendsmith strategies, as they do have a lot of graveyard reliance. So overall, Bolchummy Meows is a solid card that you guys should be considering. If we were to go back into the tier list, I would make a slight change. Again, big dogs, I'm not sure when you are watching this video, if it's before or after, but this is pretty much what I have for the tier list. I would say that these two cards are not Hand Trap into the Abyss. I would say they're closer to Sideworthy. And I think you could also say that Bolchummy Meows is also side-worthy. These cards are pretty good. I would say that Fantastical Dragon Phantasme is still situational. I personally think we would need more Link summoning. If Maliss is the only deck that does Link summoning, or maybe if we see more in Fiendsmith, then you should consider playing this card. But other than that, I think that this is completely accurate beside those changes. Now, the next thing that I'm going to be showing you guys is going to be huge for Master Duel players alike. So even if you aren't playing Yu-Gi-Oh! In the TCG right now and you're sticking to Master Duel, these cards will eventually find their way into Master Duel, which means you should probably learn them. But before that, let's talk about some of the top decks and why they're structured this way. This right here is what I would think would be a standard Blue Eyes Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck. There's not really much else to say about it. The best thing about Blue Eyes is that it can run a ton of hand traps. There's actually 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18 hand traps with the bestial monster, so technically 19 hand traps. One of the closest things to feeling what modern day Snake Eyes would be, right? It's full with 1 card combos and the ability to be able to just come back into the game, and players are still playing around with Metalronus. This card is actually ridiculous. Overall though, that's pretty much what you're going to see for Blue Eyes. For Maliss, guys, Maliss is slightly different. There are players that are playing more of a Maliss Bestial Fiendsmith deck, which means that your deck is going to be more expensive because of Fiendsmith Tract and Fiendsmith Requiem. But overall, this deck is incredibly strong. I think one of the biggest things about Maliss is that this deck was never the main selling point for some of the Maliss builds. The main selling point for Maliss was that, oh, I can play Bestial cards to be able to disrupt other Fiendsmith players, and then I can also use those same Bestial cards for Maliss. This particular version is running a really low build. I mean, 1 less White Rabbit than what players are playing, only the 2 Dormouse, which actually was standard for a lot of those builds, and 1 Maliss P. Chessie Cat, which is crazy. There has also been some builds that have increased their number of Maliss Q White Binder, now that players are going to be using Kashtira Unicorn a little bit more. But I mean, overall, this is what you're pretty much going to see for a Maliss build. As you already know, Fantastical Dragon Phantasme finding its way, Molchummy Meows, Harpy's Feather Duster is really good, and the Kashtira cards are also incredibly good for Maliss. There's even Maliss Kashtira decks. The last deck that you guys are probably wondering about that's pretty popular right now is Goblin Biker. And yes, this deck still does transfer over, even without having its natural counter to Ryziel, which, to be honest with you guys, there's been no deck list that I've been able to find of modern Ryziel. I think it's kind of crazy. What I have witnessed about Ryziel is that players have moved away from like a pure build. I've seen a lot of Mitsurugi. I've seen voiceless voice Ryziel. Of course, I've seen Fiendsmith Ryziel, but pure Ryziel almost does not exist. After looking at the new Mitsurugi cards, I would like to think that Mitsurugi Ryziel would probably be the best bet, but who knows, man? It could be anything. Man said Goblin Biker and it's mostly Memento. Yeah, this is the most competitive Goblin Biker deck you've ever seen. I don't know if we should be happy about that. The game plan is still very simple. These Goblin Biker cards help fix your consistency because they allow you to be able to get into your Memento Goblin, and Memento Goblin by itself can be full combo. But at the same time, those same Goblin Biker cards are really good against Xyz, allowing you to be able to detach cards as material. But overall, I think that this is going to be a fairly solid Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Players are now going to be siding Molchummy Meows a little bit more, so you might have to deal with that. But overall, this deck's really, really good. And I think that this is the one that was in the Greek Open. And in the Greek Open was 241 players. So that's a decent amount of players for this deck to be able to thrive in. It actually topped a couple of other events. I love simple interactions like Memento having a card with Goblin in the deck that can basically do it all. I think that's one of the best selling points. And another selling point is that it can, since like Angie Witch is a 3, Sheep is a 3. These two are pretty easy to summon alongside each other. Doug is a 3. It can be easy to be able to make like Torpedo to draw a card, or Goblin Biker Big Gobanga, which can search this card and get you another interruption, which could eventually lead to the Utopic package. I thought that that was pretty cool about this deck. Another thing to point out about Goblin Biker is that this is, or Goblin Biker, Memento Goblin Biker, is that this is one of the very few decks that doesn't really run hand traps. There's just 3 Ash and 3 Molchummy Flawless. So this deck is really good at playing through them and doesn't typically run a ton. White Forest Vanadium, is it good? Okay, so here's the thing, I haven't seen any White Forest Vanadium. We've actually seen quite some few White Forest. This is going to be a Fiendsmith White Forest Azavina deck, and this one topped the Aurora World Championship Qualifier Regional, and the Aurora World Championship Qualifier Regional was 600 duelists. So being the winner in a 600 duelist tournament actually says a little bit more about White Forest than it probably should. This deck sometimes doesn't run hand traps. This particular version does, but what I find really, really good about White Forest is that it's very similar to like Snake Eyes, right? The reason why skill drain got limited, because you would be able to full combo under Snake Eyes, set your skill drain, and then use your Snake Eyes cards to get rid of your skill drain. This particular person is playing Power Sync Stone, and this card says each time a monster effect is activated, place 1 spell stone counter on this card. While this card has 2 spell stone counters, face-up monsters on the field cannot activate their effects, and their effects are negated. During each end phase, remove all Spellstone counters. Master Duel players know what this card does. Us TCG players were a little slow to it, but this is the next Yu-Gi-Oh! Floodgate, guys. It's ridiculous. I can only imagine how many games were won simply off of the strength of this card. That Power Sync Stone is control. Oh my God, get him out of here, chat. He just got here. Go home. Go home. I think that this deck winning a 600 mana event obviously means that it's a stronger deck than what people are giving it credit, right? But I think it also shows the ability of players to go outside of the box and look at other Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks and have them compete. It's one of the benefits of not having a YCS in America, because one thing that I've noticed is that when Americans see a YCS, they just instantly copy the best decks and leave a lot of meat off of the bones. When Europeans have a YCS, they kind of still play whatever they want, right? And they find out new things. This is Bestial in the TCG. I want Master Duel players to pay attention. There's one Chandra, there's one Sangan Kaiman, there's one Sangan Summoning, and this deck still topped, I think it topped a couple of regionals and won a couple of regionals. So I'm just giving you guys the heads up. If you thought that Tenpai Dragon was dead, no, it was just waiting for the super powered Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks to finally leave. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Make sure you head to TheCaliEffect.com and pick up your Raven Wing 3.0 sleeves and use code TJ for 78% off. 78% off, brother. I am giving you guys a huge discount though, because we're working on version 4, which should be the last version of Raven Wing, the final version and the finished product. So go ahead and pick up your cheap Raven Wing sleeves today. I have them for $6. I don't even think you can find sleeves for that cheap online anywhere else. We have another cool deck in Chimera. I know that I often bash this deck, but it finally getting a top at the Canterbury Regional, congratulations Jack O'Brien, does bring a little bit of life. I think that Yu-Gi-Oh! Might be healing, basically because of the ultra powerful, overpowerful one card combo decks have been hit a bit. It allowed some of the other powerful decks to be able to thrive. Now, again, I want you guys to stay on your toes because it's still the first week of the ban list. So this may not be true. It's just players experimenting before they find out the top deck. I feel like when the new evil hero cards get added to Master Duel, it's gonna pop off against the meta. My sweet, sweet, sweet summer child.
It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again.
Next, we have Odeon. Some players thought that this deck was going to go completely off the map, but seeing that the Fiendsmith cards didn't get hit, it didn't necessarily change its position. It's still a really, really powerful deck, and it can run a decent amount of hand traps and cards like Dominus Purge, which is really, really strong. Me personally, I like the pure version, but let me know which version of the Odeon deck do you like. I think pure all the way. I'm not Fiendsmith Goon in here, guys. Like, this just pretty much illustrates that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is in a really good spot. Crystron is kind of insane right now. I've been seeing a ton of Crystron players top using this deck, and keep in mind, this is incredibly budget. I think this entire deck, all the way decked out, was maybe like it's $262, guys. I know it's expensive compared to like One Piece and Pokemon and stuff, but $200 is fair, guys. I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Would be its best. Is any Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta deck you can get at the lowest floor is about $200. And like, if 70% of those cards, or maybe not 70, let's say if at least 30% of those cards can transfer over to other cards via staples, then we're in a really good spot. I would personally love that. Let me know what you guys think about that. I have an Atlantean Mermail. For the people that thought that this deck was dead, I originally thought that it was dead, and then I started playing around with it. I have a deck profile that says that no, it's very much not dead. It's still really fun. And while I did show you some cool combos, I wanted to re-emphasize that, hey, this is just me showing you some combos with the deck. I would not say that this is the deck list, even though I did give you one. This deck still shows that Mermail can very much compete. And to be honest, after playing the deck, I think that it's a lot more healthy now that Bahamut Shark got banned, though I still think that Totally Awesome should have been banned and not Bahamut Shark. Next is the last deck that I want to show you guys. So look, we got some deck lists from Pleasant Hills, which is 247 American duelists. And then one of the biggest talks of the town that I think we should talk about, guys, is one of the biggest events just happened this weekend. This event might be considered bigger than YCS Mexico because a lot of the South American YCSs don't have a lot of people. Normally it's like 300-400 people. French just had 818 people, and Fire King won it all. Granted, it's one of the best players in the world, Dinkabui, shout out to you, but this Fire King deck is a lot better than what people were giving it credit. And Dika did run those cards like Ally Adjusted Cycle Reader, Meows, and DD Crow, and he also explained why he ran those cards, which is the reason why I had to change them in my tier list. It made so much sense. But overall, this deck this is one of those ones, guys. It's actually really good. I've been playing this deck since it came out pretty much, and I've been playing the pure build since forever. I don't believe in none of that snake eye stuff that you youngins are playing. I believe in this version, and this version is really, really good. It has everything that you need to be able to combat the meta, but more importantly, I think that Yu-Gi-Oh is in a healthy spot because of decks like this. Most of the decks that we showed aren't really big, long, boring combo Yu-Gi-Oh decks. I think Yu-Gi-Oh is at its best when we're in a format where decks can combo, right? There's a huge decision tree for you to make. I think that Yu-Gi-Oh is at its best where one hand trap can affect your combo, and it probably should in some type of way, unless you're playing the hand trap incorrectly. And Fire King being able to win an event shows that at least right now in Yu-Gi-Oh, the meta is a lot different than what we've seen from last format. It's drastically different, and huge 50-minute turn combos don't necessarily mean you win the game. But again, let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Can't wait to see what you guys have to say. Your homework for today is to tell me what deck are you rooting for this format. I'm gonna always be rooting for the same decks that I always do. I'm Mean Team Fire King Unchained guy. Can't wait to see what you guys have to say, but until then, check out these other videos.